So, this video should have been out many months ago. I have no excuse for this, and I would like to apologize to everyone for it taking as long as it has to get this video out. With that said, let's get started, shall we?
Our Hard T-Man asks, what are your opinions on Pokemon X and Y if you played it, and what is your favorite Pokemon? At this point, I have zero interest in Pokemon X and Y. It didn't look that interesting to me when it was first announced, and most people I know who played it said it was a step backwards from Black and White. Now, I did play the remake of Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, which was decent, I guess, but it didn't really do anything to make me want to play the series' true jump into 3D, especially with that aforementioned criticism I've heard since its release. As for my favorite Pokemon, it's really hard to pick just one of them out of a series that has over 700 of them, so instead, I'll pick my favorite from each generation. From the first generation, it would be Starmie because it's a starfish with a shining gem, and starfish in real life are just fascinating creatures even without gems. The second generation's Tyranitar for being the Pokemon equivalent of Godzilla, both in terms of designs and, well, being one of the best Pokemon in the entire series. The third generation Sceptile because of its unique design and great move pool. The fourth generation's Lucario because, well, that was one of the very few good things to come out of Diamond and Pearl. The fifth generation Krokorok, and no, not Crocodile because, well, the red coloring just looks terrible on it. And the sixth generation's Dragol because it's a seahorse that looks like seaweed, which is a really neat design. Also, it's a dragon Pokemon that looks absolutely nothing like a dragon. Duke Nukem 3DO asks, are you planning to get a PS4? Yes, but not for a while, namely due to 3 reasons. Number 1, I still don't own a Wii U, and if I may be frank, there are a lot more games that interest me on that system than the PlayStation 4, be they ones that are already released or ones that are coming out. 2, the Canadian dollar isn't exactly doing so well, thus the price of the PlayStation 4 went up rather than down. Sure, it's not as bad as other countries like Australia or Brazil, but $400 in any country is hard enough to justify for purchasing a brand new console, let alone $450 plus tax. 3. There aren't that many exclusives on the PlayStation 4 that I'm interested in playing. Not to say that there are no games on the system worth playing, but given that I already own a rather decent PC, the amount of titles that interest me like Shadow of the Beast, which isn't out yet, are on a very short list. ADusty0212 asks, if you could add one mechanic into Fire Emblem, what would you add? The fatigue system from the Banner Saga. Fire Emblem 3CS776 experimented with the idea of fatigue and units becoming tired the more they battled. While the idea was not executed very well in that title and made the game far more frustrating as a result, I think something more along the lines of how the Banner Saga approached it, i.e. units who fall in battle are alive but severely wounded and suffer a drop in stats until they rest, would be an interesting approach to difficulty and a neat alternative to the casual and classic modes seen in Awakening. Bedolashka asks, what do you think of Chrono Trigger on the DS? The Chrono Trigger remake on the DS is really good, probably the best version of the game that's available. It has all the cutscenes from the PlayStation version without the long loading times, and has a fair amount of goodies exclusive to this version of the game. The only downside is that the resolution isn't the best, but that's to be expected for a game on the Nintendo DS. If you haven't played Chrono Trigger yet, and you have a DS or a 3DS, definitely pick it up, it's a classic. Serpu Studios asks, what do you think about the new Mickey Mouse series by Paul Rudish? What I've seen of it, I've really enjoyed. Just from an aesthetic point of view, it's pleasing to see an art style that, while an obvious homage to the original Mickey Mouse shorts, has its own unique style that looks wonderful, especially some of the backgrounds. That said, I'm not exactly a fan of Chris Diamantopoulos as Mickey and prefer the shorts where the characters remain silent, allowing the animations to tell the story rather than the characters. Admittedly, I haven't seen every short in the new series, but I've seen enough to say it's well worth checking out. Any series that can at least acknowledge that Goofy is a dog in a universe where dogs are considered pets, or that Donald Duck is wearing a sailor suit, yet we never see him actually do anything related to sailing, has to be doing something right. Zangoose82 asks, what was your favorite game as a kid? Again, like naming a favorite Pokemon, it's really hard to pick out a single game that was my favorite from my childhood. At best, it can be narrowed down to a 3-way tie between Pokemon Silver, Pokemon Ruby, and Yoshi's Island. Pokemon Silver was the title that really got me into video gaming and JRPGs in particular. Pokemon Ruby was when me and my friends started to play, trade, and battle Pokemon together, and would continue to do so when Pokemon Diamond and Pearl came out. Yoshi's Island was a very charming platformer that always stood out as the most unique of the classic Mario Bros. Titles. It was and still is one of my favorite games of all time, one of the very few games that I dare say has gotten better with age. Thorax the Viking asks, Yo Kaz, if you were to cosplay as a character from Fire Emblem, who would you be? I'd probably say Joshua from the Sacred Stones, mainly because of that hat. Sure, he doesn't have a cape, but look at that hat. I mean, must be comfortable if he's wearing it in battle of all things. Do you have a Fire Emblem waifu? No, I do not. In fact, I find the whole concept of the waifu to be a rather immature and, in some ways, disrespectful manner of viewing women characters, regardless of whether or not they're fictional. Darwin St. Philip asks, You talk about Persona 1 and 2 in your Persona Q review. How well, gameplay-wise, do you think Persona 1 and 2 have held up over the years? Have they aged like fine wine, or are they a bit rusty and dated next to newer RPGs? Also, what's your favorite Shin Megami Tensei game? I don't want to dwell on either of these questions too much since I do plan on talking about the Persona series as a whole in the future, and my favorite Megami Tensei title also happens to be my favorite Persona title. That said, Persona 1 is woefully outdated, possibly the most poorly aged RPG I've ever played. It's ambitious, sure, but neither it nor its PSP remake hold up very well. Persona 2 is an interesting case because it's technically two games, Persona 2 Innocent Sin and Persona 2 Eternal Punishment. Gameplay-wise, Innocent Sin is a little too easy and random encounters are a bit too frequent, but the battle system is interesting and it's definitely worth a playthrough for the story and characters alone. Eternal Punishment fixes the lack of challenge in the original and added even more spells as well as a very mature story with rich themes sprinkled throughout it. However, turning Maya, one of the best characters in the entire Persona series, into a silent protagonist is one of the worst ideas I've seen in any video game. Each of them has their flaws, but the two Persona 2 titles hold up rather well when compared to most non-Square RPGs released during the PlayStation era. George Reyes asks, I've been following your YouTube channel for about 6 to 7 months, and I really like your point of view about the games you review. You tell us everything about a game. Here's my question. Have you ever collected so many games, especially with Shin Megami Tensei or other Japanese RPGs, is useless? I'm about to move because I got a great new job, but I won't be able to play too much, so if I keep buying games, eventually I'll just decorate my house and not play with them. What do you think about this? Greetings from Mexico. You have a fan right in this country. By the way, do you like Mexican food? Sometimes, though I find that happens more with the amount of digital titles that I own on Steam. Over 100 or so and I barely touched a third of them at most. As far as collecting them physically, I'm of two minds. Yes, they take up space, but I usually don't find them collecting dust unless the game in question is bad, and even if it is, I can always just sell it or trade it in for store credit. In addition, there are some cases where collecting them physically is the only option to play them, outside of emulation, like the Starfy series, and when it comes to titles that are rarely printed, having a physical copy is incredibly reliable. Also, Mexican cuisine is absolutely delicious. Congratulations on your new job, by the way, George. I hope it goes well. Gently Contemporary asks, Yo Kaz, how you doing, mate? I'd like to ask you a simple question. Are you a video game collector, and if you are, do you only play games if you're familiar with, or are you open-minded to trying other genres? Congrats on the 3rd year. Keep on churning those videos out. Well, I'm not sure I'd call myself a collector, not in the traditional meaning of the word at least. While I'm always willing to try out new games if they look interesting regardless of their genre, there are genres which I'm more fond toward, and there are some which have become so stagnant over the years that it's become harder and harder to be interested in them. Sports titles in particular, with their yearly releases, lack of innovation, and variety of titles. Seriously, why are there no games about lacrosse? I like lacrosse. DT Rex Gaming asks a series of rapid-fire questions. Number 1. Fire Emblem or Shin Megami Tensei? Fire Emblem. Number 2. Would you ever do a full review of Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn? Oh yes. Number 3. What are your opinions on how Nintendo is handling the Wii U currently? Not very well in spite of what looks like some excellent exclusives. Number 4. Do you think that Fire Emblem Cross Shin Megami Tensei is forever cancelled? Nope. Number 5. What are your plans for your channel in 2015? Better reviews and returning to the Western Retrospective series, probably based on another Nintendo franchise or the 5, possibly 6 depending on the latest one's release, Persona titles. Number 6. How much time goes into each review? It depends mostly on the review, it's hard to put a number to the average amount of hours it takes. Number 7. Besides your channel, who is your favorite YouTuber? Extra credits. If you aren't watching them, you're missing out. Also, since we're on the subject of YouTubers, shout out to Nitro Red, who I fully expect to pass me a number of subscribers by the end of the year if he hasn't already. If you aren't watching Nitro Red, go do that. Preferably after this video because there's still a few questions left. Number 8. What was your favorite game of the 7th generation? A two-way tie between The World Ends With You and Red Dead Redemption. Number 9. How is your day going? The simple questions always matter. Mine is going fine. How's your day going? Chesumori asks, what exactly is the deal with the helmet on the character in your logo? The short answer, I'm a terrible artist. The long version? Back in high school, I would often sketch out certain character designs, mostly due to boredom in classes that I had little interest in, but also because for a while, I was planning to start a comic book series with these characters. One of the most common designs I would draw was a heavily sketched knight who had a crescent moon-shaped helmet. I don't have the original design lying around anymore, but at the time when I decided to update the channel's avatar, said design was what I based the new avatar off of after an intent to make an original knight character, well, didn't work out.
However, I do have an announcement. The Knight avatar is going to be appearing in future videos, thanks to the wonderful work of Waro, who, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, and is also a very talented sprite artist who you should definitely check out. Link will be in the description. That's all for this Q&A, folks. I'm, once again, really sorry that it took as long as it did to get this one done. I have no excuse for it, and hopefully if I do this again, it won't take as long as it did to get this one done. With that said, as always, until next time, game on, my friends. Oh, also, since it's taken as long as it has to get this video out, here's a short little preview of the next video. Take a look and enjoy.
It's the Halloween season, a terrifying time full of frightful sights, ghoulish nights, and an absolutely terrifying atmosphere that permeates the air. One in which I am obligated to stop everything I planned on reviewing to talk about something horror-related. Except for last year because, to be frank, I didn't want to rush one out just for the sake of having one on Halloween, and instead put out a quality video. This year, the original plan was a 3-part special on 3 Konami games to show just how much the company has changed over time, mostly for the worse, to the point where they turned the critically acclaimed psychological horror series, Silent Hill, into a Diablo-style thing. Also, the worst HD collection ever, but frankly none of that is happening because Konami is Konami.